Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a little while since we did a live stream, so we thought we would come at you this Friday with a topic that, there are sometimes when you know you need to bring some things up, and the information and almost the tension just continues to build until you go, we got to talk about this. Okay. Now, I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to tell you a little story. So whenever we're working with a customer, and I understand this because I own a business too, right? The desire is to make information as simple as possible for your entire team because it yields productivity, understanding, all of those sorts of things. But there is a point in time where if something is too simple, you're probably not getting the performance out of it that you might if you had a better solution. And sometimes that solution's a little more complex, okay? So today we're going to be talking about chemistry, chemicals, different types of products, and how sometimes they work better when paired together than if they were just a one-size-fits-all solution for one task, two tasks, or every task, right? But again, I'm a business owner, so I understand how important training is and understanding on behalf of your employees and those sorts of things. So don't think that what I'm saying today is contradicting that knowledge, okay? We know that simplicity is key, and the simpler we can make it, the better off it's going to be for your business, for preventing against liability, results, etc. Okay, so these two things are in tension together. I understand that. Let me tell you a little story so we can get into this. So this week I was working with a really good customer. His name is Jimmy Schaefer, up in Indiana, and we were working through an assessment guide so that we can help our customers develop a more fluid and teachable sales process on all levels. What we're doing here is going to apply to odor mitigation, to mold remediation, to fire damage restoration. You name the environmental service, and it will apply to that service because this is more about good mechanics, okay? It was the first time that I really understood, I think, what some people mean that, like when I'm teaching on chemistry, a lot of times people are like, listen, I just need to know the basics. I don't need to know any sort of deep chemistry here. And it's easy to dive too deep at times. Well, Jimmy Schaefer is a PhD in putting together and refining sales processes for their organization, or I should say a sales process, and then refining it over time so that it's more duplicatable for their team. And when you get into a sales process and when you get into the information that a good salesperson needs to be a great salesperson, you dive into nuance, okay? So I want to give you an idea of this. So when we were working through the initial, let's call it the interview with the customer to get a baseline of everything, and then we got into the accomplished list side of things, for me as a manufacturer, it's tempting to think about that accomplished list from the standpoint of what tasks or what jobs need to be performed in order to accomplish what, from my standpoint, the customer needs. However, it was really interesting to hear him talk about it because at this point in time, in an accomplished list, he's looking to get a general sense of what the customer is trying to accomplish today, right? And today, as he pointed out to me, was an important word that they use in their sales process because it helps to discern between what is a priority to you now and what would just be nice to have, right? There's no commitment behind a lot of times what would be nice to have. It's what is most important to you today. And that's a nuance of the way that you ask a question. If we go further into this and we get to the inspection side of things, where we maybe create a graph of the area and we list conducive conditions and all these sorts of things that will assist in educating the customer, and then we go back to that customer and educate them and have an area for what we called clarity for today's visit. Well, it seems like we are revisiting the accomplished list, and in some ways we are. However, now it gets a little bit, it's where what was found and what that customer initially wanted to accomplish comes together to really solidify the commitment that today is when this is very important. Because if you go into, and let's just say that, in the accomplished list, the question is taking care of the mold important to you today? Okay, this was written for a crawl space and basement in this case, and there's detail up above that would lead to that question. It's not just an off-the-cuff question. And then when we get over to the clarity section, the question is mold remediation important to you today, right? Or is mold stain removal important to you today? Now we're refining that. We're bringing that down, and now we're able to put numbers together for the customer and really get it into a budget, right? Or we may find that customer, it doesn't meet their budget, and maybe they need a same as cash program, or maybe they need to, do things today and do some things tomorrow, right? But it gives us a lot of information as we refine that. And it reminded me that, again, I'll just say Jimmy Schaefer's a PhD in putting together sales processes, or a sales process for his company, because he thinks through those nuances of the sale and everything that he's learned over the years about what creates commitment on a buyer's behalf. And he knows that if they were to simplify it too much, if they weren't to use terminology like the word today, if when they are talking and initially interviewing the customer, mold, right, and they use that word yet to also signal to that customer that, well, even if you haven't seen it yet, it's likely that you will see it at some point, right? He's taken all of this nuance and created questions and this sales process that gives him very good results. And so when we're talking about chemistry and we're talking about results, whether that be in the form of removal of soil load, removal of odors, whether it be the penetration of soil load, the time that it takes to penetrate, the dwell time, which is similar, but in the case of, if we're talking about disinfectants, right, we're talking about then log rate and things of that nature. I think I said temperature, time. All of these things are variables that are in part nuance. And they lead back to, if you understand these products and the suite of products that is our product line, then you begin to understand how they work together to create a better result. So what I thought I would do today is just take you through some ideas of what I mean by that. Okay? So let's start with OxyPrep. Okay? So most people are familiar with OxyPrep. OxyPrep is our instant stain remover. And recently, we came out with a product called Sorbassist. It's a brand new product that is an odor counteractant for OxyPrep. Now, it can be used in many different ways, right? Initially, the idea was, let's make sure that if we're doing mold stain removal or if we're running the react extract process, that we leave the customer with a fresh smelling home. Now, I give you this example first to say that you could use OxyPrep by itself and probably achieve exactly the same stain removal results than if you never used Sorbassist in the first place. However, the nuance of it is that you want to create more Google reviews, more and better Google reviews about your company. So if you want to do that, is it best to use OxyPrep by itself? Or is it best to also make sure that it smells really good when your customer gets back home, right? And I would argue that if I'm trying to maximize Google reviews and the result of not just the job, but the result overall, which is where the nuance of the field and sales come together, right? Then we use these products together to give you the best result overall that your customer can experience, so that those Google reviews are the best they can be. Okay? Now, another example of nuance, if you will, of products being used together is the use of OxyPrep and OxyPar together, right? The nuance here is that while OxyPrep is your mold stain remover, that OxyPar is the reactive product in this case that together forms a neutralization reaction on the surface and drives the mold to the foam that's formed through that reaction. Now, sure, the result of that for you as a business owner, for a technician, for a supervisor, anybody working with this, is that immediately you reduce your cost of labor by 60 or 70%, your time in remediating because of that neutralization reaction. However, the nuance of it is the result is improved, right? Through that neutralization, not only do you remove and extract the mold, giving you a far cleaner surface than if you were to scrub that surface, like, let's say, the old-fashioned way of doing it. But in all of those areas, think about joists in a crawl space or a basement or an attic or something like that. Or even if you're working in open framing where you've got sheathing, abutting 2x4s and those sorts of things, right? In that situation, how do you get to those hairline creases where mold has also formed? And the nuance here is that we use reactive chemistry to get there. We allow that to do the work in that case, instead of you having to do it with small brushes and taking more time and all those sorts of things. So then again, we begin bringing this together in the sales process. And as you are assessing a customer's property, if you're on the sales or assessment side of things, now you're able to pull those arrows out of the quiver and explain to your customer that you have a better process and why it's better and how it's superior to the competition, if you will, in your local area. And I think that part of our job together, and part of what we've experienced over time, is that we can be stronger together than we can be apart. You know, we used to distribute through some of the big boys in the industry. And the reason that we did was we thought it would be good for sales. Well, it turns out that if we're not having a conversation directly with you and we can't see the pictures and we can't talk to the technicians, then we can't be as helpful. And in the long run, this is all about having a relationship with you and your team so that you have a trusting technical resource in your hip pocket to call on when you need to, right? When the job is tough, when the result is unexpected, when it's something new that you've never seen, we're able to collectively put our heads together, and amongst all of us, because we've got thousands of jobs that we've experienced in the past, you've got thousands of jobs that you've experienced. So together we can accomplish a lot more as a team, right? And that's where working together and making sure that step by step we take the time to understand the nuance, that is done properly. Sometimes we've got to slow down to do that too, right? It's easy to jump into a web meeting and to look at some pictures and to immediately want an answer like that. We all want answers now. But it's also important to slow down and to think about it and to think about the experiences that we've had in the past. And it's okay to even step away for a little bit and come back together and say, hey, based upon just kind of thinking through this, through looking at some things of the past, here's where we think we need to step next, right? Patience is what we all need to have in working together as well. Sometimes it doesn't come to you immediately. But again, if we've got a great relationship, and that's what we always endeavor to have, then we can give each other a little bit of leniency, and we can be patient with one another as we figure out the right solution, because that right solution is about performance, it's about safety, it's about results, your customer being happy, mitigating liability along the way, right? There's a lot of variables that come into it, and sometimes it's not till the next morning after you've slept on it. And my dad told me this a long time ago, like, if you're not 100% sure, and sometimes even if you are, sometimes you just need to sleep on it, right? And then come back together and then say, okay, I slept on it. My thoughts on this are a little bit different today than they were at 5:30 in the afternoon yesterday. The solution. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there because we work with you, and if you've worked with us, you know that we work a little bit differently that way in terms of wanting to really consult and think through things to benefit your business. So, okay, so let's move that aside from now. We've talked about OxyPrep, we've talked about OxyPar. Let's talk about this one, Grease Gobbler, probably the worst name that we have in our arsenal of products because it doesn't explain everything that it does. But I'm going to take you through what I mean by that in a second. Okay, so once upon a time, I was working with Mike Allen up in New Jersey, and he was getting ready to go on a job or look at a job that was exterior restoration job. And when you're dealing with exterior restoration types of work, you're dealing with mold and algae, and you're dealing with oxidation of surfaces, and a lot of times you're dealing with a tannin stain that's coming from like leaves of trees and things of that nature, just the natural environment around you, right? There's all kinds of variables in terms of soil load, and then substrate. You're dealing with vinyl, you're dealing with brick, you're dealing with aggregates, stone, it's a lot of different things that can be thrown in there. Again, we've got to step back and consider everything that we're doing. So as we were working through it, we knew that OxyPrep would remove the mold staining, obviously, right? That we could react OxyPar so that we wouldn't kill any plants and gardens surrounding things, because we needed to neutralize the OxyPrep to make sure that no harm would come to like surrounding vegetation and things like that. But then we were up against one other thing, and that is, man, we can remove, even from like this vinyl siding and everything, the algae growth, the mold growth, all of that. We can make sure that plants don't die around the house. But at some point, we're going to get down to that bare substrate. And on that bare substrate, we're going to have oxidation, okay? And then the question is, to the customer, do they just want to get rid of the mold and the algae and things like that? Or do they want to remove that oxidation as well and really get back to